Okay. Um, Aside from coronavirus and all of the distancing, there's other interesting stuff going on in the world. There's a shift in value perspective of ourselves and our country, and people who have not had fair treatment for forever, really for forever. Um, so uh, there are so many ways that we need to think about this, and there are so many perspectives we need to uh, look at. Uh, Governance, assistance, uh, being an ally, so, so many different things really that we need to evaluate. I was recently at one of my mentors, teachers, Rabbi Reuven Leuchter, who lives in Israel. He is an author, a deep thinker, in as much as Judaism has philosophers, a philosopher, maybe with a hint of rational Kabbalah as well. I mean, but a very deep thinker. And I was recently on a call, a Zoom class with him, and he touched on something that really struck me, that where so much of the issue comes from is our collective and maybe our own personal assessments of what is Adam. What is the distinction of the human and the purpose that Torah gives the human? And when we look at Adam in that way, perhaps we can shift and elevate ourselves, which will then elevate the world with us. Of course, we constantly try to become better people and to work on ourselves and bring other people with us and to look how we can help others. So I wanted to touch on some of the things that he said and that I thought of uh, in the time since then. Feel free to shout out some of the thoughts you have around all of these, all of what's going on, whether it's how we care for the Black community who has been not properly cared for, how we care for ourselves and making ourselves better people in the way we look at ourselves and others and our relationship with others. So feel free to shout out at any point. I wanted to, on the first source, show a change in the Declaration of Independence from an initial draft to the text that we know of. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Was a change from, we hold these truths to be sacred and undeniable. So for a government that is wanting to allow for freedom of religion, to move away from the sacred and undeniable to self-evident, fair enough. And, you know, a little bit of the history, Thomas Paine pushed for that throughout, and Thomas Jefferson, a friend and being influenced by Thomas Paine, very much wanted the divinity, the God aspect out of the rational argument for individual freedom. That's the historical background, which is not what we're coming to talk about today, but it is an interesting point. But I think it's a valuable perspective to have. Self-evident is very different than sacred. And for us, where we're not a governmental body, we're individual people who do take sacred seriously, we, I feel, ought to put that back. Obviously not in the document, but in our perspective, in the way we see it. we see these truths sacred as opposed to just self-evident. It's more than self-evident. It is sacred. It is coming from a place of kedusha. It is coming from a place of holiness. It's coming from a place of truly seeing each individual human being as a person of potential, as a person of greatness. And that's something that is, to me, very powerful. And over the last few really month now, whatever, almost, right? It's been really an important part of my personal work around it, is seeing the sacred, the kedusha in every person.
May I interrupt for a minute? Because,
sure.
As having this discussion, as I'm listening to your words, I'm really disturbed by the word self-evident, because it makes an assumption, which is not a reality in our world. We've had that demonstrated these last few weeks. It's not true. It's very disturbing. I think we need to change it.
Well, we're not going to change it.
No, I know that. I'm just
but it is undeniable, and that's in the same vein as self-evident. It is actually deniable because it has been denied. It is just self-evident. It is closer to self-evident itself, is closer to the truth. But sacred, I think, is the important part. It is a sacred.
No, I would agree, but I think there needs to be something else that makes it a guarantee, so to speak, and neither self-evident or undeniable make it a reality.
That's the difficulty of the human condition, is we can never make it a guarantee. In the best of societies, we cannot guarantee that there will not be someone who does something wrong. There will be racists, there will be evil, there will be wrong, as long as this world is filled by humans who have choice. And so that's the difficult part. We cannot guarantee it. We can only create an establishment for that space of right, and try to create laws to protect it, and create a society that from a governmental side, unless we put everybody in chains, there's just no way of really providing freedom, which then allows for people to make the wrong choices, and they do, and we do, and we are, right? We are fickle, struggling people who have good days and have less good days, and for each person, the struggle may be in a different point. Art and I have talked about this recently. That the point of free will is different for one person than another, depending on so many circumstances of where they grew up and what they've been taught, and perhaps in our for everyone sitting around this virtual table, really hurting someone in a deep way is not really a choice we're struggling with. But little things, when we want to chat with someone and then a piece of gossip pops in our mind, then we have to hold back and say, yeah, I'm not going to mention that. That's to us the struggle. Like, yeah, don't say that, right? In our own mind, like holding that back. My 6-year-old now has gotten into the habit of saying, his teacher taught him this at Mayan, saying, hold your thought. So puts his hand on his forehead and says, hold your thought. That sometimes we have to do that. So that may be our struggle, or some other issues. But we all have moments that we're feeling stronger, and moments that we're feeling emotionally or spiritually or ethically compromised, and where we need to encourage ourselves and to get ourselves in a good space.
Back to the deck.
Go ahead.
Back to the deck. Yeah. One of the phrases that was urged in the drafting was natural right instead of either sacred and undeniable or self-evident. And that was urged by Jefferson and Paine. But that was rejected because it sounded like it was anti-religion. Natural right had nothing to do with the sacred, and therefore they came up with the compromise of self-evident. And coincidentally, maybe not so coincidentally, I've been reading a book on the biography of Stephen Douglas by David Blatt, a Pulitzer Prize winner from the Yale History Department. And Douglas really struggled with the question of whether it's natural right, or it is sacred, or it's both, and what the combination of both should be, as he was condemning slavery and joining the abolitionist cause. And some people say, including Blatt, that Douglas may have been the preeminent author, orator, analyst of the issue of slavery in the 20th century. And I'm surprised, frankly, that not more has been said about Douglas in the last few weeks. But I suppose that's history past.
Yeah. Exactly. The aspects of the last few weeks that have not been dealt with, I think, are the bigger issue than what has been dealt with. And I think that's an unfortunate part of our lack of history and appreciation and understanding of how we've gotten to this place, and from my perspective, not understanding how we got here means not understanding how to go forward. But right now we're not fixing the world. We're just going to try and fix ourselves a little bit. I do think
the undeniable part of the sacred to me is really important, if that were part of it. To me, the sacred comes from above, which flows down to meaning that it's undeniable on earth. Sacred comes from above. The undeniable on earth, and undeniable to me comes from the outside. Whereas self-evident, someone can say, it's not evident to me. But if it's undeniable, it's something that, even though we struggle with what is factual, that is factually undeniable at our level. Anyone can say it's not self-evident to me, but if you say it's both sacred and undeniable, that kind of closes that discussion out. It doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter what a person believes themselves, it's factually undeniable.
Yeah, I am in favor of sacred and undeniable. I'm less of a fan of Thomas Paine than I am of some of the other people in his time. But that influence was there. And as Arden was saying about the natural law, it does make its way into later parts of the document, where it says natural law and its God, or nature's law and its God. I don't remember exactly the phrase, but in 4 different versions, the N and L of natural law are capitalized, not capitalized, and so they're they're working with that as well. So they struggled with this a lot, and in a part of it was about slavery and about the blacks and about people and about the Native Americans, the Indians, which they needed to believe, and here Thomas Paine was great at it, and saying it needs to apply to every human creation by God, not by God, but by by nature's law, right? But they couldn't take that step at that point. Couldn't is a word. They felt that they couldn't take the step at that point, but built it within the system to be able to get there. But I think, leaving that history aside and leaving where it led to so much pain and suffering, but also the ability to break out of it for these 200 plus years, the sacred, I think, is where we, as non-governmental bodies, as people, who believe in kadosh and holiness and seeing kedusha in people, as people who, as Marshall said, to whom sacred is from above and therefore of great importance to us, we must at least put that back into our version of how we see these truths self-evident, that each individual person has the rights, and as Lois said, and we must protect. We can't guarantee we're human, but we must do what we can to guarantee that dignity, those rights, that ability that others may try and take away. So where is that sacred? That's really the work that I wanted to look at. And really, it's to see it in ourselves. If we see it in ourselves, it will hopefully reflect it on others. And if we don't see it in ourselves, we will not be able to reflect it on others. It's a very powerful part of, in Kabbalah, it's, and I don't like using the term, but in the depth of what Torah is teaching, it is when we are full, we can overflow and give. But when we are empty, then it's hollow. Or Am Yisrael is represented by the moon on account of that we reflect light. So there's got to be goodness coming so that we can reflect it at others. But we have to be able to have that. So always we have to start with ourselves. And so where do we see kadosh, kedusha in ourselves? Where do we see what it means to be a human in ourselves? So famous, of perhaps one of the most famous verses in the Torah and thrown around a lot the last few weeks, but anytime we need to stand up for humans. And God created man, right? Man, capital, which also is interesting. In several versions of the Declaration of Independence, the M is either that all men are created equal. Men is capital, then would mean the human being. And in one version, it has the M lowercase, which would be men. And unfortunately, from the start, women didn't have equal rights. They couldn't vote, and et cetera. So men would then mean male. But over here in this verse, as evidence from the last part of the verse, it's talking about humans, the humankind, because it says male and female, they were created. So it's obviously talking about men and women. So God created man in the image of his. I tinkered with the text there, which is not a proper, it's not proper grammar, right? Because the word in Hebrew is not proper either. It's Vayivra Elokim et Adam b'tzalmo, and Hashem created the man. So I added the man there, in there, and b'tzalmo, not in his image, but an image of his, which is I think an important distinction. B'tzelem Elokim bara oto, formed him in the form of God. He created him, male and female. He created them. So that's no. So what does it mean to be in the image of God or in the form of God to a people that don't believe God has a physical form? So what does it mean to be in the image of God? And this is something that is in our text throughout. Anybody want to throw something out for what it means? What does it mean to be in the image of something that has no image?
It's in the striving for perfection, with the kin olam.
A striving for good, for perfection, right? God can be perfect. We're not going to be perfect, but a striving for that, or as in in the text of the Declaration, it says, in the pursuit of happiness, right? You can't guarantee happiness, but the pursuit thereof. Okay, but so it's trying to do good, the attempt, the work towards the good, which means that I have the ability to choose. And that's really what it is, and that's why it's an image of his, but it isn't the image, but it's an image. It's one aspect of the divine, which is the striving for good by making choice. That's the ability to choose to do good. In source 3, we have, in the second chapter, the more detailed description of this. Hashem God then formed the man, dust of the earth. He blew into his countenance a breath of life, and thus man became a living personality. That last line I borrowed from Samson Raphael Hirsch's translation in the German, where usually the translation says, and thus man became a living being. But it says lenefesh chaya, to a living soul, to a living personality. And that's a very important aspect that is so often missed in the King James translation. It's not that the human became a living being. The human may have been a living being beforehand, as the first part of the verse says. But a living personality, a nefesh chaya. That's what it was added here, is that the soul blown into its countenance from the divine. And that's the living personality. So we have striving for good, the ability to make choice, and it being personal to each individual way of each person. Wow. So now, not only do we have the image of God, right, being created in the Tzelem Elokim, is not only that we have the striving for good and the ability to make those choices to get there, but it's individual. It's the personality of each person, and someone may tend to be, quieter, and somebody may tend to be more outgoing, and somebody may tend to be a teacher, while somebody else may be more likely to be a mathematician. Somebody will do better at handiwork, while somebody else is not going to be handy at all, but can be very creative in their mind. That's the kedusha. The holiness of the human is in that not only we strive for good, but in the individual ways that each person is going to do it based on personality. I find that so delightful in the perspective of looking at different people and seeing the value in ourselves. What do I bring? Me. And what do you bring? You. And what does that person bring? Something. And seeing that is, it's so powerful when we think about created in the image. It's sacred not just because, this is some mirror of the divine. No, the mirror of the divine is the individual way. The mirror of the divine is that each person striving for good by making choices based on who they are. It's so good to see Rick shake his head finally. Every day I see him I learn with him in the morning without seeing it. What do you think, Rick?
So far, so good.
Okay. Okay. So here's 4 and 5 really go together. Going back to the end of the first chapter of Bereshis in creation, everything's created. Last comes the human being, and we're about to get to Shabbat. Okay, we're about to get to when everything comes to be in harmony, Shabbat, everything sort of is going to work together. God saw the entirety of what he had made, kol asher asa, and behold, very good. I tinkered with the translation there as well to be truer to the Hebrew, to point out its peculiar way. It doesn't say, and behold, it was very good. Behold, it's good, as it said it in the other verses. It says, Kol asher asav v'hinei tov ma'od. And behold, very good. So that peculiarity is mentioned in the Midrash, and there are probably about 24 teachings on what that meaning could be. In any case, then was the evening, then came the morning. It was the end of day 6. All the work is created, and Shabbat came. Okay, wonderful. But before we get to Shabbat, we have this V'hinei tov ma'od. And behold, very good. So what does very good mean? So the Midrash here works on, this is the second to last of what I said is nearly 24 interpretations in the Midrash. The second last deals with the 3-letter root ma'od. The 3-letter root ma'od has the same letters as the 3 letters for Adam. V'hinei tov ma'od, and behold, very good. The very is Adam. Adam is very. So Hashem saw everything and saw, behold, very good, which essentially, as if it says, very meaning Adam, person, ha-Adam is good. The human is good. So what does this Midrash mean? So this is a teaching that I learned from Rabbi Leuchter this week, 2 weeks ago. Ha-Adam, the Adam, the very. The root of why we don't see people for the value, for the image of God, for the sacred, and therefore we can hate people, and therefore we can oppress people and hurt people. This only comes because we look at people and see the surface. We don't see ma'od. We don't see very. What we see is the surface. And we assume that what we see is what is there. And we don't see potential, and we don't see depth, and we don't see breadth. We see just the narrow that's there. But Hashem, V'hinei tov ma'od, the goodness of the human being is in the ma'od, is in the very, is in the depth of the human personality, and in the breadth of their personality, in the wealth of the potential. We see that in children because we know that there's still potential. We know that they're still in development. But when we look at adults, we tend to look at adults and see it's in a stagnant, stationary place. And we think of them as the here and now, the interaction itself, the momentary. And we have a very difficult time seeing the potential, the future. The Midrash, really the verse, but the Midrash on the verse, the first murder in the Torah. A brother killed a brother. And God says, the voice of the bloods of your brother call out to me. And the Midrash says, what's bloods? It should say blood. The bloods of your brother, because your brother and all the potential that would have come from him call out. That's what you missed. You missed in hurting your brother. You only saw the moment. You only saw the surface. You did not see the very. You did not see beyond. You did not see potential, depth of personality, breadth of personality, all that could be. And we don't. Sometimes about ourselves. Sometimes we sell ourselves short. When we are challenged, we step up in a way that often we don't. And we wouldn't know where our strength is without that challenge. So the challenge actually brings us to a new height, brings us to a new place, because we have brought ourselves to something we would never have tried. I have no idea how much I can bench press. Not that that's a value to me, but I don't know what I can do because I've never tried, not never. Because I don't try, it's not a value to me. I don't put anything into it. And so I have no idea what I can get to. But it's a metaphor for some really important things. So this challenge that we're in has to take us to places, well, where can we see the depth of people? How far can we see the depth of ourself, our own personality, our own breadth, our own depth, and how far can we take it for others? When we see people, are we seeing Tov Ma'od? Are we seeing Adam Tov, a personality, Ha-Adam, the person, as good, because we see not only the moment and not only the interaction and not only the surface, but where they could be, how strong, how broad, how deep, and we don't. And the truth is we don't. We don't about many people, and there are certain people we see it less often or less so. And that's really the struggle and the work that we need to do. But I think when we think of the sacred, the kedusha of how to fix this, we must see the sacred in the Tov Ma'od, in the Adam as being so much more complex, so deep, so broad, so much more. There are so many videos and memes and things going around, but there's one that really struck me. A black man took a video of himself saying, "I'd like you to get to know me. Before you judge or anything, I'd like to get you to know me." And just went through where, I like to ski. This is what I do. You may have seen it, but just goes through a really mundane. Some of it's mundane, some of it's nice, and some of it, but really just, "Hi, I'm Tzvi Fischer. I got goats in my backyard, and I got 6 kids. And my daughter just graduated from high school, and I got a daughter going to 8th grade." All that kind of stuff, just the basics. And it was so powerful because we don't. When we look at someone in front of us, we just see the very surface. We've talked about this in this group, and I mention it a lot, the contrast between the English and Hebrew word for face. The etymology of face is a facade. It's just the outside layer. And the etymology of panim is panim, the inside. It's a window into the personality. It's a window into the inside. Vayhi Adam lenefesh chaya, and thus the human being became a living personality. When we can see someone as that, we truly elevate ourselves and that person. If we can see ourselves that way. What am I doing today? I don't know. Well, how much do I respect myself? Well, how much value do I give to who I am? The personality and what I can bring. Lois, close your ears. Yeah, thank you. For me, Lois's work on her last book was inspirational in many ways, but I remember in multiple conversations her saying, I have what to bring. I have something to give. It's a depth of personality to see, I'm not stagnant. I'm not just this. There's breadth, there's depth, there's more, there's potential, there's something I can do, there's something I can give. it's a tremendous perspective of self, which allows for me to see others in the same vein. And anybody that knows Lois knows that, right? But that will help the world become a better place if we see ourselves as a greater potential. We see ourselves deeper, broader, more very. More, that's the word very, the human being very, meaning there's so much more. It's enormous. And it's a living personality. And that's the sacred. Let's tackle, if we can, the last part. Rick, you're laughing at me.
No, I'm not laughing. It's very, very good.
Okay. So 6 and 7. So this is the beginning of the second chapter of Pirkei Avot, and there's a statement by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, known as Rabbi, and Rabbi says, "What is the path that ha-adam?" And this is the same word used as in the verses, the 3 verses we brought. Ha-adam, not Adam, but ha-adam, the human. Now, I think the human is the entirety of the personality, as opposed to Adam, human, man. Ha-adam. So what is the path that ha-adam, the Adam, should choose for himself? I tinkered with the translation there as well and took out their translation and put in the word tiferet, because I wanted to work on that. The word tiferet, the person, one which is a tiferet to the person doing it, and is tiferet to others as well. That's the first part of analyzing what's the choice of my path. What is the choice of path for ha-adam, the human? 1, to choose a path that is tiferet to myself and tiferet to others. Now, anybody want to know the classic translation of tiferet?
Glorious.
Glorious. Something that brings glory, something that gets compliments, if you would. Right? Something, that kind of glory. But if you look at 7, we're going to skip to 7, the translation of Ovadia of Bartinoro. Ovadia of Bartinoro was an Italian 15th or 16th century commentator on the Mishnah. He was a physician who wrote a commentary on the Mishnah, and he translates it, that which is noach lo. Noach can be pleasant. Noach can mean easy. And that's the part I want to point out is, if we're talking about ha-adam, how do I know what's my path? Well, what comes naturally to you? What is pleasant to you? What is easy for you? Again, the strength of each person is going to be in their personality. So often we're cookie cuttered into a certain way. I got to do this because this is what everybody's doing. This is the way it's got to be. We, 30 kids in a classroom. We're molded and shaped into something else. But we really have to look in if we're going to look at the sacred of each person and the depth of their personality, the breadth of their personality, their potential. It's each one individual, and we as adults need to do the same. Well, what comes naturally to me? What is easy for me? What is something what can I bring that's good for me, easy for me, pleasant to me, but also to others? It's only good if it also is good for others. It also brings pleasantness and ease to others as well. Which is why I don't bench press, because it's not good for me or anyone else around. Right? But that's the first aspect. The second aspect is equally important. And be careful with a light commandment as a grave one. Now, we don't know what a light commandment or a grave one is, but the idea is often people will say, look, it's easy for me. So this is what my mission is because that's my inclination. And therefore, I'm going to ignore everything else. No, we have to do it all. We have to care about others. We have to, if it's not easy for me to care because I'm a shy person, right? So I have to think of what I can do within what's easy for me, but I must also take care of others. I must also do the other things, and vice versa. If I'm an outgoing person, so that's easy for me, but I must also take care of the things that are not necessarily my personality. I can't ignore it. The contradiction is in the next line. The next line says, and calculate reckon the loss of a commandment against the reward and the gain against the loss. Wait, you just said you can't calculate the value of a mitzvah. That's true. But we also have to reckon, we have to do it all, but we have to emphasize what it is that I can bring and leverage it against those that can do something else. That's where Kehila comes in. The danger of the first line of looking at the world from my personality and what I can bring is that I'm an individual and I don't have to care about anyone else. It doesn't make a difference if it meshes well. Well, no. The three steps here so far we have is one, you have to evaluate your path by seeing who you are, valuing who you are, and evaluating what you can contribute in the best and most natural way. Because each person is in the image of the divine, blown in with the soul of the divine, therefore is a living personality. So you can't just be someone else. You have to be you, who you are, and live that and contribute that way. But you can't ignore the rest of it. The things that are not easy for you also have to be done. But you have to calculate the value versus the loss, meaning leverage it. See who can do that in a better way. If I'm a shy person and somebody needs care, I may not be the best person to do it. Okay, but I can encourage someone or support someone or create the platform for that person to do it. So I'm leveraging. I'm seeing the value of the loss of a particular mitzvah and its gain, and I'm leveraging that. That's where Kehila comes in. And that's where the collective personality is going to be much stronger. Because what Richard brings is not what Rick brings, and what Rick brings is not what Surah brings, and what Surah brings is not what Lee brings. Everybody brings their value and their strength and their personality and their perspective. And in the collective, that's very powerful. And then just one more Hebrew aspect. The next part, it says, look at what three things he won't come to do to transgress any of these ideas that we just talked about, of this valuing the self and valuing others and growing and seeing the sacred in every human. Da mala mala mimcha. Typically translated is see what's above you. In other words, understand that there's a God who's looking at you and recording all your deeds, and therefore it's often taken as a scare tactic, right? See what's above you, and because it's all being recorded, that's the way it's usually translated. And this translation, again, I got from my teacher, Rabbi Lichter. He says, no, that's a mistake. If you look at the Hebrew, it says, da mala mala mimcha. Know what's above is actually from you. Your actions, the way you live, is what affects all of the above, all of the divine, all of the worlds, the heavens are created by you. Da mala mala mimcha. That which is above is from you. There's an eye that sees, meaning everything you do gives perspective. It changes the way the world is seen by others and how you see it. Ozen shamat, everything that is said is heard, and therefore it affects the world. V'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim, everything you do leaves its mark in a book, meaning you are creating history. You are leaving an indelible mark on the world that you live in. Value yourself. We must value ourselves. And when we do, and when we see that we are living, we make a difference, we create the world we live in. And then we will see the depth of personality in every human, and we will see that they too are living the history and creating the history, and we will elevate them together with ourselves, give them the opportunities we give ourselves, and we will make the world what it ought to be.
Kol hakavod.
This has been a little bit of the work I've been working on myself these few days, just to see that kadosh in every human. I think it's a little new, but for me it's new, but it is so important that we put that sacred back into the sentence, even if it's not in the document, but we hold these truths to be sacred.
Yes, sure, Koach. This has been, in my view, one of the best shiurim, one of the best sessions, classes that we have had. I am grateful for that. When I signed on, by the way, they said this session was being recorded. Does anybody know how it's being recorded?
When I use the Kollel, Zoom, it automatically records into the Kollel account at Zoom.
So it would be possible to get a copy out of the Kollel archive.
Yes. But, this is a masterpiece, so we're going to hold on to it for 30, 40 years in mint condition and then sell it.
Right. I only wanted to rent a piece.
This could be a whole other topic that follows it. But here's my question or thought. What do you do when there is the other that has a huge body of work that is what we or what one believes is the antithesis of good or the antithesis of sacred? Whether it's a governmental leader who acts in a certain way and treats people in a certain way, but instead of you can look for the sacred and the good in that person, but there's also a lifetime or less of a body of work where they don't act that way, whether it's an institution or a government or an individual. And how are we to deal with that without just succumbing and going, hey, okay, this person has good things too, but how do you then deal with that?
Yeah. It's a much bigger topic, and obviously it's going to need a session of its own. Somebody called me this morning with that question basically, where they were expressing frustration about unnamed individuals and societies, and their friend, who is a devout Christian, said, "I pray for them and turn the other cheek." And this woman called me and said, "As a Jew, I nearly vomited." Right. So I said, okay, that's fair. And I taught it, I repeated to her a teaching from Beruria. She's the wife of Rabbi Meir, who was one of the teachers in the Mishnah. And Beruria comes up often. She a fascinating personality, a great scholar, and a deep thinker. And so Rabbi Meir had a person in his neighborhood who was similar to the person to personalities you're referring to. They had the metaphoric Confederate military flag hanging in front of their house back in Rabbi Meir's times somewhere. Someone who really didn't like their Jewish neighbors and other people and would harass them. And Rabbi Meir announced one day to his wife, "You know what? I'm praying that a truck hit them." This guy, that's it, really. And she went, "That's not our way." David HaMelech says, Yitamu chataim min haaretz. King David in Tehillim says, let sin cease from the land. Sin, not the sinner. So we do believe in that aspect of it, but not in turning the other cheek. In facing up towards it and not standing idly by is what the Torah teaches us. And we have to stand up to it. And we can't stand idly by. That's the way the Torah teaches. We have to make a stand, but make a stand by seeing the sacred and wanting that to shine through. See, that's that. I'll take it to the racist mind, because this is important. This is where, from Thomas Paine's day, from where they didn't want slavery to be abolished, all the way to today. The argument is, yeah, but look how bad they already are. We can't see the good in this person. Look at where they are. They're already so low. We cannot see the depth of this person. We cannot see the breadth of this person. We cannot see the potential of this person. And Brewer said, no. Even such a person, what we're hoping for and what our job is to bring out the bit of good that can be, and then a little more good, and then a little more good, and then a little more good. When we shut it down, we don't allow for any change. When we resign ourselves to the fact that that's bad, and they are bad, and that's the way it is, the result is it remains that way. It becomes a shouting match. And it becomes, we patting ourselves on the back saying we are better, and that's it. End of story. But if we see the sacred in ourselves and our obligation and not stand idly by, and to be able to be not only good for ourselves, but good for others, we will elevate the world with us. Will it take a lot of work? Yes. Will it take a lot of us with a perspective like this? Yes. Will it be immediate? No. Do we have time for it to take a long time? No. Right? As Martin Luther King said, they're gradual, what was it? I forget the phrase. There's the time for gradualism is gone, or something like that, right? We can't do gradualism, but it does take time. We're not looking for gradual. We're looking for perfection. We're aiming for perfection. As Arden said, that is the Tzelem Elokim. Looking for the goodness to the nth degree, but also recognizing that it's a process. In ourselves, it's a process. We haven't always been as good as we are today, and hopefully tomorrow will be better than today. And same for others. And the little bits of influence of good will come not in Rabbi Meir's, let's take this down, but rather in Bruria's, let's make this better.
So is that an alternative translation of Tiferet? To elevate or to enhance? Yes.
That's how I believe Bartanora got that interpretation of Tiferet. Perhaps we have to follow up with this conversation, with more. We're beyond 1:00, but I think if we're talking about really the work we can do, it'll come from us shining forth in this way and seeing every person as sacred, and seeing every person as potential, and seeing every person as a depth of personality, and seeing the breadth of who and what they are and the life they're living. It becomes so much bigger.